It's time. It's time for another episode of AMX Weekly. My doggy is walking at my toe tips, my toes, the tip of my toes. Josie is sniffing around the office here, and I'm about ready to rock and roll. It's Friday afternoon. Quick reminder, this episode of AMX Weekly of the Spaniard Show will be uploaded to my podcast feed here just in a little bit. It will actually be published tomorrow, which is Saturday. Every week, we have AMX Books, we have AMX Kids, we have AMX Talks, and we have AMX Weekly. Remember, AMX is just shorthand for learning. It's our system and our style of learning, from grown-up books, from kids' books, from interviews, and then by synthesizing all of that with AMX Weekly. It's all yours, but you got to subscribe on iTunes, whatever podcast app you're using, to The Spaniard Show. Yes, you can catch me here on Facebook Live, if you so please. Also uploading the videos to YouTube at youtube.com/Charlie Spaniard. But most of all, it would mean the most to me if you'd subscribe to the show, the podcast feed, because by way of doing that, and then the exposure on iTunes, the show grows and the message grows and lifelong learners develop and grow together. So all of that, I appreciate your consideration. Let's rock and roll with today's episode. In 1 second here. Give me a sec. Give me a sec to organize some of the behind the scenes. See you later, Joe's. No, Joe's still sniffing. We got all the Christmas stuff right there, about ready to go back in the bins. Back in the bins. Another quick reminder. I've said this at the beginning of the last couple episodes that I have recorded. I am listening to the audio book of Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, and it is a really, really good, hey Nick, it is a really, really good book, and I suggest you listen to and or read it. Also, reading How to Change Your Mind, which is about psychedelics and their many uses. Incredibly mind-blowing. And it's going to be a fun book to cover on the show here as well. We're bringing you books from all walks of life, all creeds, all beliefs, all kinds of stuff, and it's really exciting and fun to do. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's hop into. Oh, my dog's sniffing my toes right now. AMX Weekly 95. 1, 2, 3. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Spaniard Show. This is the Spaniard, and this is AMX Weekly. Number 95, 95th week I've done this, and I remind you, the Spaniard Show is bringing you 4 different tracks from which to learn. AMX Books is Monday through Friday. AMX Kids comes out on Tuesdays. AMX Talks is on Thursdays, and AMX Weekly, yours truly, what you're listening to now, comes out on Saturdays. Get all of that by subscribing to the Spaniard Show on iTunes or whatever podcast app you're using, as well as youtube.com/Charlie Spaniard, as well as facebook.com/Charlie Spaniard, as well as, no wait, that's it. Okay, let's dive into this week's AMX Weekly. AMX Weekly is a recap of my week's learning. It's things when I look at my journal, my notebook, and I think about the things that I've talked about. It's the things that I want to bring to light again. Maybe it's because it's really mind-blowing. Maybe because I think it'll be interesting to you. Or maybe it's for me to repeat and secure more concretely in my brain, because it'll help me speak better, be a better presenter in the future. For any and or all of those reasons, this is what we're about to talk about. Bullet point number 1. This is an intro. The book that I started on Monday is called American Wife by Taya Kyle, who is the wife of American sniper Chris Kyle. It's an incredibly insightful book, and this comes from AMX Books 651, and this is an intro. This episode is an introduction to the book American Wife. We hear Taya's story, so this is essentially an autobiography of Taya's story, but then we also learn about the life of Chris Kyle. Remember, Chris Kyle's autobiography is American Sniper. This is kind of it's her autobiography, but it dives into his life as well, because his and her lives were connected. In the book, she also talks about the Chris Kyle Frog Foundation. Now, I talk often, especially when I'm talking about military men and women and reading military books, this idea of mission above self, the idea of belonging to and or contributing to something that's bigger than yourself. One of those things that Taya has created after Chris' passing is the Chris Kyle Frog Foundation. So she's an activist. So she took on this role as an activist for military veterans and their families. In the Chris Kyle Frog Foundation, quote, it was created to, quote, serve those who serve us by providing meaningful, interactive experiences that enrich family relationships. So it's another veteran service organization that really tries to help the lives of veterans as they either are in the military or get out of the military. In the introduction to the book, I also talk about the Patriot Tour. Now, the Patriot Tour, do yourself a favor and do some Googling. If you know the name Marcus Luttrell from the book Lone Survivor, the movie Lone Survivor, Marcus Luttrell, I think he started the Patriot Tour. He's absolutely one of the prominent figures in the Patriot Tour. But it's essentially a speaking tour. Now, I've never gone to it. I do have a bucket list goal of going to one of their events. But Taya speaks at them. Marcus Luttrell speaks at them. David Goggins speaks at them. So there's Chad Fleming, I believe, speaks at them as well. So there's a lot of military and or military spouses who speak at these events. And I thought it was really cool because this book is bringing out good, okay? So, war is terrible, obviously, but sometimes with news and the awareness of all the evil in the world, we forget that there's good in the world. And this book does a good job of reminding us, and actually not only reminding us, but showing us, and I'm going to talk about Taya's faith here in a minute, showing us to have faith in the good. In the Patriot Tour, upon doing some research, I learned that, quote, brings together the best things in life: family, sacrifice, and community. Heartfelt speakers, each sharing their stories of perseverance and each embodying the fight for freedom and the fight for the team and the fight for a rich and vibrant life, born of the desire to bring hope and change. So all of this, right, this entire segment, Taya's story, Chris Kyle's story, American Sniper, Chris Kyle Frog Foundation, the Patriot Tour, all of these, it's examples of all kinds of goodness. And in a world where it's so easy to get lost in the track of ugliness and not goodness, do yourselves a favor, do some Googling on the things that I just talked about, and heck, maybe even pick up the book American Wife. The next thing I want to talk about, and I made an allusion to it, is Taya's faith. So Taya is Chris Kyle's widow, and she experienced it, underplaying it by saying this, but it was extremely difficult, the experiences that she has lived through. Not only when Chris was alive and overseas, but since his passing. And in the book, she really dives into this, and it's like for lack of a better word, like a full frontal. Like she exposes herself to us and all the fallibilities and all the contradictions that she feels in her mind and going through these experiences is something that she's very forthright and forthcoming about. So we get introduced to her faith early on. And she said in reference, and this was before she met Chris, before all of this happened, she was referring to down times, right, or tough times post-college. And if you're a college student, get ready for the tough times that are about to come upon you. But she says this, quote, and this was dealing with those down and tough times post-college. Looking back, I feel as if God had to break me in a way. He had to let me feel the results of my stubbornness so that I could understand the beauty and potential of life. I had to be convinced that I wasn't destined to be a loner. So this is our first introduction to her faith. In the book, she's an extremely faithful person. And whether to you that means religious, whether to you that's something more spiritual, whatever it means, I'm going to go back to the book Man's Search for Meaning. That's a book that I think every human should read. It's a short book, but it talks about Viktor Frankl's experience in a Nazi German prison camp. And this idea of hope and belief and clinging to something in order to get you through is the underlying message here. Taya, and I'm not going to say unwavering because it does waver. Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low. But this convicted faith that she possessed is extremely prevalent early on in the book. And it's a reminder what she's saying there. I feel as if God had to break me in a way. He had to let me feel the results so that I could understand the beauty and potential of life. It's like you got to take a cool shower to really appreciate a warm shower. And that's actually a daily practice that I took on since reading. I had heard about it, of course, with Wim Hof and being on all of these shows and the cold therapy, hear about it. Cryotherapy. I actually did cryotherapy a couple years ago when I was fighting. But after reading Aubrey Marcus's Own the Day on Your Life, I started taking a cold shower. And I'll tell you what, it really makes you appreciate not being freezing cold that much more. And that plays in the line of what Taya's talking about here, that she feels God had to break her in order to see the potential. And I think it's Joe Rogan that says meaningful struggle It's that idea right there. You go through struggle, and then you ever get sick? You ever get sick, and then the second that you're not sick, you're like, oh my good gosh, this is the most incredible feeling ever. Whereas 2 days ago, you were like, oh, I got to do this and I got to do that. And then you get sick and you're like, oh, just please help me feel normal again. And if you're a wrestler, you sure as heck know what I'm talking about when it comes to water. You know, water, whomever you are, wherever you are right now listening, if you're, some of you drink water, absolutely. But then there's some of us who are like, oh, I'm so thirsty. I want a Gatorade. I want a soda. I want a this. I want a that. Well, I'll tell you what, start cutting weight. Start having your mouth not even be able to move and talk because it's so dry. The only thing in the world you're going to want is a sip of water. 8 ounces might be too much water because that's a half a pound. I can't put on a half a pound right now. I'll just put it in my mouth. This is what we use. I mean, this is normal. You put it in your mouth, swish it around, and then spit it out because you can't afford to put on any of the weight. It's that meaningful struggle that enables you to really fully appreciate that glass of water. Tuesday's episode of AMX Kids. Now, this is a much more serious note than those fun memories. But Tuesday's AMX Kids was the most special AMX Kids episodes I've done, and one of the most special episodes I've done. And it is a celebration of a life well lived and a legacy left for a son. So I covered the book I Love You Like by Scott Sutton and Alec Traub. Now, this book was written from a father to a son, a father who was dying of cancer, written to his son as a legacy. So the book itself, I Love You Like, it's a really neat book. It's awesome. The illustrations were done by an author, Glenn Zimmerman, who works at Garfield Studio. So it's a first-class produced book. And to learn that he did it in a relatively short time, and to learn that he did it with this purpose and this mission. And in this episode, in AMX Kids 28, I dive into the whole thing. I explain everything, my connection to it, the fact that his wife took time to talk to me, whom she didn't know, to talk about her husband who recently passed away. It was a really, really, really special and memorable experience for me. And the feedback that we've gotten from the episode is awesome. So I highly encourage you, one, listen to AMX Kids 28, and then second, go get a copy of I Love You Like. In the episode, I have links to it. I have links right now on my website to it. You can get it on Amazon, I Love You Like, grassandhopping.com to get a copy as well. So however you want to consume it, make sure you consume it, and make sure you get some tissues, and say a prayer for people like Scott Sutton. Moving on, I'm going back to one of the oldest, most recurring themes on the book. And actually, as I'm recording this, Kevin Hart, who represents this new movie, comes out tonight, which is January 11th. Energy, Energy. But in this case, we're talking about Chris Kyle. So this is talking about Chris as a person, and this is coming from Taya. She says, quote, part of the reason I wanted Chris in my life was that he had a zest for things. He had such a zest for things. He was exuberant about even the simplest of things. Everything, even just reading this, I'm smiling. It's contagious. About the simplest of things, everything he did brought me energy and cheer. As a SEAL, he certainly knew dark times, but he could go from darkness to light with a hearty laugh in zero flat. The message here is be that guy or be that girl. Be that guy or girl that spreads energy and zest and cheer to other people. Don't be the energy vampire. Don't suck the energy from other people. Don't be that Debbie Downer. Be the person that adds light. And then even more special, more meaningful of that is really be it, right? Really be that energy and cheer. Don't walk around unhappy on the inside and putting on this energy and cheer on the outside. Do the work, do the reading, do the thinking, do the reflecting. Put in the actual work, the dedication and commitment and discipline to feel good about yourself so that that energy and that zest that you're giving unto other people is real and comes from the right place, and that it's not a fraud. Be that guy, be that girl. Shine on other people, folks. It's a choice. This is a really, actually, if energy is one of the themes that we talk about most on this show, one of the other ones, and Mission Above Self, which I talked about either on this episode and or on today's AMX, is the idea of humility. So there you have three of the most prominent themes on this show: energy, mission above self, and humility. The three of the most important characteristics that you and I as a human being can embody. So Chris Kyle eventually, with his prowess, with his sniper prowess in the SEALs, he developed the name Legend. He developed the name Legend, right? The Legend. And in the book, it's really cool. It talks about the evolution of that name and how he reacted to that name. And Taya says this about him and about that nickname: and may this be a guide for you and I. He took great pains to tell others that he wasn't the best sniper in the teams, let alone the U.S. military. He said his high kill count came mostly from the situations he was in. There were simply a lot of enemy combatants coming at him. As I said before, the lesson of humility, this is me talking, the lesson of humility ranks among the top in all the universal lessons that I've learned through these books, especially the military. It really started jumping out to me when I read Jocko Willink and Leif Babin's Extreme Ownership. Look, these are the alphas, right? Professional fighters, UFC guys. Yeah. You know, some are alphas. A lot are alphas. You know, the toughest in the world. But when it comes to like life and death, we don't know. I don't. The majority of us don't know anything about really fighting for your life. Like really, no, I might die. Yeah, there's a risk when you fight in a ring that you might die, but the risk is so minuscule. When you're in battle, right? When you're as highly trained and highly skilled as the military and the special forces, it's a whole other level. So they have the right, I would say they earn the right to walk whatever walk, they would talk whatever talk. But it's incredible. The most successful ones, the absolute most successful ones, stress humility. They're pushing off, and this is the whole idea of extreme ownership and how you interact with bosses and the dichotomy of leadership. The whole idea there is dishing off the applause and the awards to other people. That's the name of the game. Humility is the name of the game. Let that be a lesson to you and to I and how we interact with others moving forward. The next AMX Talks 213, my interview with Willie Banks. So Willie Banks is a former world record holder in the triple jump. 58 feet he jumped. And if you haven't mapped out, I doubt you have a tape measure in your pocket right now, but maybe if you're walking, take 58 steps and consider that's how far Willie Banks jumped to break the world record. He was an Olympian in the triple jump. He has some stories in this episode, AMX Talks 213, released on Thursday, that will blow your mind. I sat with him out at the Spartan World Championships in September, face to face, having this conversation. I was a schoolboy. With my jaw dropping, smiled ear to ear. It was like he put me in a trance. I feel like that's what he does. He's a speaker as well, so he's pretty good at it. But he put me in a trance to hear the history in his Olympic stories. If you like sports, if you like the Olympics, you like competition, you need to listen to this episode because some of the things he talks about, they'll blow your mind. Specifically, and this is a little bit outside that idea, but ties into what we're talking about here, about living for this vibrant life that we're talking about with the Patriot Tour. He says this, quote, "Don't just focus on your community. Go out. I think we've lost that in our society. People don't go out to other worlds and experience what's out there and bring it back and try and incorporate that into their lives. We don't listen to stories as much as we used to. Now we sit and play on our phones all day and we don't listen to anything." Look, this show is called the Spaniard Show, World's Toughest Lifelong Learner. It's about going out there. It's about learning. It's about bringing it back and trying to incorporate it into our lives. Look, it was Dr. Andy Galpin who said, a couple weeks ago on my show, he said, everything's like a practice. We're just going through a practice. That's it. So what I say and do today, it might be different in a month, in a year, in 6 months, the way I train, the way I eat, the way I think, etc. I'm an evolution of myself. Granted, you don't want to get far from your core values. It's like step number one, identify those core values, set them in stone. Even they'll change, to be honest. I value family, my family right here. I value it so much more than I used to before I had a family. So your values are even going to change. Your moral compass, right? Make sure your moral compass is in check. But from that point, from that position, go out and experience and try and do and experiment. And in time, it buffs out such that you become you, right? So following in line with what Willie's saying and the idea of the show is learn. Go out and learn, try, do. Don't steer far from your moral compass, but within that compass, just like the guided drift. Remember when I read Mr. Rogers' book and we learned about the guided drift? It's essentially a river with a flow and a current, but within that flow and a current, we kind of, weave our way around the rocks and all the pieces of wood and stuff in the river. The river is your moral compass, your values. And within that, experiment, try, do, and in the end, it will help you become the best you. And lastly, to cap off this week's episode, but then to touch on one more point from American life. As you grow up and you experience more and more, you realize it's not always 1 + 1 is 2. It's a lot of things that are involved, and it's not so easy. It's very difficult. A lot of mud, as Taya explains in the books, feels like she's crawling through the mud, and that's how you feel a lot of times. That's just how life is. But she's talking about the decision of Chris to either re-enlist or not re-enlist. She obviously wanted him to stay at home, but at the same time, she wanted to support him. So it was this that she's very forthright about, and it's comforting to me, who lives a life of adventure and travel and newness and learning, and it's not easy to be married to someone like me. So it's comforting for me to hear Taya tell her story, which then makes me feel like, wow, great, I'm not alone. And that's a very comforting feeling, and that's the reason that I want to bring it to you. So Taya says, quote, "It turned out that I wanted that more than he did." She's referring to the stability of staying home. "He loved being a SEAL more than he loved being at home, or at least he loved them equally, and thought he could do them both. I didn't." Think of that. He loved being a SEAL more than he loved being at home, or at least he loved them equally, and thought he could do both. I don't know how many times I've beat my head thinking, oh my gosh, how can I want this and that? How can I want to be the champion of the world and fight? And that takes me away from home, but I love my family more than anything in the world. So I must be broke. Something must be wrong with me. I can't be feeling these two things at the same time. But the more you read, empathy and understanding was a theme this week on AMX Books. The more you read, the more understanding you have, not of just the world, but of yourself, of these dichotomies that exist. It's natural to feel this way. I'm not weird. I'm not broken. I'm not the only one who thinks this thing. There are many other people who think this thing too. And just that awareness and just that comfort it's reassuring, and it takes the tension out of your shoulders, or it takes the stress off of figuring that problem out. This is also a great example. This book does a tremendous example of bringing us into the lives of military families. I think you and I probably know, we assume, military men and women, they travel a lot, so they're not home a lot. But then when you actually read the details of it and what it's like, raising two babies when you're, by yourself, when your husband's overseas, it's just a lot of empathy building information that you'll read in this book. Absolutely incredible book. I'll be spending another week talking about it on the show next week. I encourage you all, like I said at the beginning of this episode, subscribe to the Spaniard Show. We're bringing 7 episodes a week. Most of them are short, easy to digest, but they're all based around this idea of lifelong learning, based around going out there, living, doing, trying, evolving, and then doing it all over again. I'm not going anywhere, folks. 7 episodes brought to you every week. Spaniard Show on iTunes. Follow me on Facebook Live, where I record all of these episodes in front of a live audience, even though it's virtual audience, because it keeps me on my toes. Otherwise, I'd hit stop, delete, record, stop, play. Facebook.com/Charlie Spaniard, YouTube.com/Charlie Spaniard, on iTunes podcast app. And here's another cool thing you can do if you'd like to help to support the Spaniard Show. You can go to Patreon.com/Charlie Spaniard. We're up to like 13 patrons, and it is really cool. I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. For as little as $1 a month, you can help support the Spaniard Show, and I'll tell you exactly how. So I got an email from a school about speaking, and their budget was significantly lower than what I charged. So one of the things that these patron subscribers will eventually help to do is contribute to speaking programs at schools where I can, in fact, these young people with the idea of lifelong learning. That, again, is at patreon.com/CharlieSpaniard. And if you're a school or a business and want to inquire about my speaking programs, please visit charliespaniard.com/booking. And while you're there, check out my reading list, social media, etc., etc., etc. Have yourselves a merry little weekend. There you have it, my folks. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Ryan, I don't know if you're still there, buddy, but I heard something the other day that made me think of El Perro Grande. Hope you're doing well, my friend. I did all the plugs. I'll see you guys on Monday morning for AMX Books. See ya.